Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rook with Eric Snodgrass, Senior Science Fellow with Nutrient Ag Solutions. We have been seeing the markets put some weather premium in here, Eric, and from a lot of different perspectives. And so let's talk first of all about South American weather. We've been hearing about some flooding situations down in parts of Brazil. Can you get us updated on what's going on?
Yeah, the flooding is pretty isolated, but it's isolated across some key acres, and that's down in a place called Rio Grande do Sul, so the Rio Grande of the South. And it's the southernmost state in Brazil. And if we look back over the last 2 weeks using satellite data to estimate total rainfall, we've got some numbers down there that push 500 millimeters. So that's nearly 20 inches of rain hitting some key acres. Now, they don't grow a lot of safrinha crop in that state. It's mostly full season crop down there. But at a time when they would be thinking about harvest, this is extremely wet weather, and it may be part of this overall narrative as to why things have started to change a bit.
No doubt. And is that extending into parts of Argentina as well? Because we've been hearing they're having trouble getting soybeans out of the field, not only in southern Brazil, but also in Argentina.
Yeah, I saw a lot of severe weather lately in Argentina. So there's this river called the Paraná River that runs right along the same area as Rio Grande do Sul, out of Paraná into Argentina. In fact, it ends where the Buenos Aires kind of grain exchange area, and where Rosario is. So it's right in that area that we're talking about. Okay, so long story short, been a lot of storms down there, and you get just north of it. I mean, literally, what's north of Rio Grande do Sul? It's Santa Catarina, then Paraná, and that is where all of the safrinha crop is grown, and it's been bone dry there lately, and we're not expecting any rain to come back on a lot of that safrinha crop. So yes, you have this split: north very dry, south extremely wet. So you're either in flood or you're in drought right now if you're in those pockets of South America that grow a lot of the crops we talk about.
Yeah. We've been talking, I know you and I have talked before about, central Brazil getting hot and dry, and they're going to move into that right now, aren't they?
Yeah, this is about, I call it 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks early on the slowdown of the monsoon. And so they normally begin their dry season once you get into the month of May, coming out of April, but it started to get dry at the very end of April. And already just in the last 2 weeks, we've found places that have not picked up any additional late season rains, which have been critical for the safrinha crops. So will we see a response in yield and production? Possibly, but it wouldn't be something that I think would hit major, news until harvest happens in June, that we could see the influence of this dry weather. And it's not just dry. Temperatures are running 5 to 8 degrees Celsius above average, which means it's quite warm for autumn weather down there. So yeah, that monsoon shutting down early could be an issue that will start to creep up once we start talking about our June weather here in the United States.
So at this point, do you think the market is overreacting to some of this South American news?
This is a great question. If I knew what the market was doing some days, I'd be a much richer man. But the thing is that you often find these compounding factors, right? So there may have been several other things that start to spark the market to go in a different direction, and then all of a sudden there's a weather story on top of it, and the two things compound. And so we look for those nonlinearities to really shove things in a different direction. And I believe that there are some folks that are now listening more to the weather narrative simply because of the different position the market's taken over the last few days.
I know you and I have been talking about this all winter, that,
Yeah.
you knew there was going to be problems. The crop was smaller, but the market just disregarded it. So it's been interesting to watch. Are we also starting to see some concerns here in the U.S. Midwest about the rains that we've had slowing and meaning some planting delays?
Yeah, so if you just look over the last 7 days alone, going from eastern Texas into Arkansas, parts of Oklahoma, getting to Missouri, Illinois, even parts of Indiana, but then the whole Western Corn Belt, we've picked up a lot of rain, some places 6 to 10 inches. You may have seen on some of the other news feeds, just the cars driving through flooded waters and getting stuck. Well, imagine what the fields look like. What was funny was, you rewind the clock back, we were begging for rain. And now I've got guys like, shut this off. We can't take another drop. And I get it. This is that critical time in early May where we'd love to have a crop fully established. And the next 7-day forecast is really pumping more moisture right over the same areas. So we're going to be sitting on our hands probably until we get out there past the 10th, 11th, 12th of this month. Now, I say that in the same breath, most of central Kansas has been missed. We've got hopes of storms coming in late this week and into the weekend into that region, but big chunk of the hard red winter wheat belt into the panhandles has not seen this. The storms keep lining up a little bit farther to the east, missing some of those critical acres. So it's again, great contrast. In fact, if you go from central Kansas to Missouri, You go from places that in the month of April had their second or third driest Aprils on record to places in Missouri that just had their fifth, sixth, seventh wettest. So, I mean, it's amazing to see how quickly you can get a change across that part of the country with respect to precipitation.
Yeah, and actually, wheat was the first market that started to put weather premium in here in the U.S. Those HRW areas in the Southwest, are they going to continue to miss these rains or not?
Well, we've got, like I said, big hope about this weekend delivering some
Right.
moisture. But the reality about with this pattern is that I looked back all the way to the beginning of April, and the dry air has been drawn from the Bay of Campeche. That's down there by like the Yucatan Peninsula, through Mexico, which has had several wildfires, into New Mexico and Texas, and it sneaks up into central Kansas. And I'll be honest, once you put dry air in place, it's very difficult to overcome that because the first bit of moisture that comes in there has to go to just moistening the atmosphere before you even get moisture out of it. So typically what happens is drought is only broken by big thunderstorm events. And unfortunately, what do? They not only come in with flooding rains, but they come in with hail and tornadoes and straight line wind damage. And so that's why focus is going to be on the plains for not just now, but most of next week for the risk of severe storms. And I'll be honest, I'm very concerned about next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the plains and Midwest for more severe weather. So this pattern is not slowing down to start May. It's mid-May that we have to start talking about maybe windows beginning to open up in the Midwest.
Okay. And that's really early enough for us to get crop planted and with the moisture that we've had still produce a good crop, right?
I think so. I know there's some research, of course, that backs up that the earlier you plant, the better. But remember, that's all circumstantial. I mean, we've had years where crop gets planted late, and then you get good timely rains late in the season, which makes the crop huge. I mean, I was talking to a grower last night who was saying his June planted corn in central Illinois in 2019, which was a terribly wet year, was some of the best corn he's ever had because we had good seasonal moisture late in the season and we didn't get a frost until November. So there wasn't a problem with it. But there's that thought process. I got to get this in and get it established. And that is backed by historical evidence that would be the case. But I don't think I would worry too much about the fact we had to throw the brakes on right now. But patience is hard to come by.
Yeah. So is this the transition that we're seeing right now from La Nina to El Nino, or is that on the same timing as you thought it would be?
It's actually a bit faster. The El Nino, I have no evidence that the El Nino is still there. The ocean temperature is always the last thing to change. So our El Nino, which was a big one back in winter, it's gone. The trade winds have resumed their normal speed. There's cold water that's surfacing. And honestly, that's what's making the second half of May so unpredictable and getting into even early June. We'll start to pick up on the summer pattern probably once we get to about June 15th. We'll start to see what summer's going to do. And those summer scenarios are not yet cut and dry. If you use the weather forecast models, they want to take the dryness in the plains and let it creep into the central United States throughout the remainder of the summer, meaning that the Western Corn Belt gets dry first after the plains. You look at history, it says, watch the Cotton Belt. Somewhere down in the southern plains or the mid-south or the southeast tended to take the heat. We saw big ridge riding storms throughout the Corn Belt, including a lot of heat as well. The one scenario that it's still renting a lot of space in my brain is what if we go back to a big Western United States ridge? If that happens, we all have storms and rain here on the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains, while the west part of the United States burns, unfortunately. That's a terrible side effect of big Western ridges. But long story short, I would just tell you this. We're watching El Nino, La Nina, that transition to La Nina, but I would be watching the North Pacific Ocean temperatures closer. And my last statement on this is the colder they get in the North Pacific, the greater the chances of Midwest drought become. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And if you're looking at that, Michelle, and your head's spinning, that's okay. This is the time of year that our heads do spin when we think about some of these long-range forecast parameters.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on in the US and in the world to talk about right now, for sure. All right, thanks, Eric. Appreciate your time. Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. That's Markets Now.